Welcome everyone, Christine here with a discussion about the Legendary Lords of Total War Warhammer 3 Immortal Empires. Gonna start ranking them on a tier list, starting with S tier. Gonna do a number of videos on the subject because this video could genuinely take hours. Otherwise, there's a lot of Legendary Lords to cover. Though I am not going to cover the Wood Elves or the Warriors of Chaos because I think given their campaign situation, they could either be S tier in terms of strength, all of them without exception, or you could put them much lower at D or C because their campaigns are just not much fun. So I'm going to do separate videos, or at least a separate video for the Warriors accounts and the Wood Elves. But anyway, for all the other races, starting with S tier. First, we have Tyrion. Tyrion has been one of the strongest Legendary Lords ever since he was introduced in Warhammer 2. And it's interesting that for all the patches, all of the changes, all of the updates, that Tyrion has remained one of the best Legendary Lords for the High Elves. The High Elves in general have very strong Legendary Lords. They're a good race. They're an S tier race. Really powerful, and Tyrion's campaign has always worked very, very well. In Warhammer 2, he was by far and away the best Legendary Lord to play if you wanted to build a massive empire. Though Alariel and Alifanar certainly were no slouches, Tyrion has always been good. There's just something about a Legendary Lord that's really all about buffing the baseline units of the High Elves as a race. He gets a major upkeep benefit to his own army. He gets major faction-wide benefits. He really works well with a lot of armies of spearmen and archers with light armor, which is the standard of the High Elven armies that you can use throughout the entirety of the campaign. Sure, later on you might want to get some Silvern Guard, you might want to get some Shadow Warriors or Sisters of Avalorn, but Tyrion's main focus in the campaign, which is spearmen and archers with light armor, or archers in general, just works exceptionally well. On top of that, because of his starting position, his campaign is fairly straightforward and fairly safe. He doesn't have any major opponent that can stop him for a very long time. I mean, Nakari can be something of an issue if you're playing a very if you're looking to take control over Ulthuan. Nakari can give you some level of challenge, but outside of that, you're not going to face any annoyances, any frustration, any serious challenger. It can be something of a steamroll campaign, but it just works so incredibly well, and it's actually a pretty fun campaign to actually play if you're engaging in a High Elf campaign, or a campaign in general. Like, if you're going to pick up Warhammer 3, if you haven't already, this is the first campaign I would recommend for the largest number of players in general. It's just a campaign that works. It's a campaign that works very well. It's a campaign that veterans or new players can pick up and play, and they will have a good time doing so. Then for the Chaos Dwarves, we have Drazhov the Ashen. Now, the Chaos Dwarves are a great race, an S tier race, but there's certainly some issues in Zaytan's campaign, and Astrogov just doesn't hold the candle to Drazhov. Drazhov has major economy benefits through his faction effects and his lord effects. He gets income benefits to armaments, he gets income benefits to materials, he gets income benefits to gold from his settlements. So Drazhov is the richest of all of the Chaos Dwarves by far and away, just on those effects alone. But then you add the fact that the Black Fortress, his main starting settlement, it's a it's the main Cathayan caravan route. So the vast majority of the Cathayan factions will be sending caravans through the Black Fortress at one point or another, which will give you a ridiculous amount of gold and a ridiculous amount of labor, which you can also use for gold or you can use to keep fueling your economy. He certainly has a difficult starting position with Emmerich, Tretch, Gore, Screesis, Grimgore especially, but it is actually a very fun campaign to play because you have all of the tools needed to succeed. And like all the other Chaos Dwarves, or Chaos in general, he has all the climates available in his campaign. I mean, not all of the Chaos Legendary Lords have all climate types available. Nakari is an example of that. But the Chaos Dwarves, all of them do have every climate type available. So World Domination campaign, if you're going for that, you should play as Drazhov. He also starts with a nuclear weapon in the Black Fortress through the prototype Mega Mortar, which is a really powerful ability. Not as powerful as Ikka nukes, but he can use them in every army and every settlement for free with 2 charges. So overall, it ends up actually being more useful. And the Chaos Dwarves are just a very well-designed race. Then you have Grimgore, which I would certainly put above both Tyrion and Drazhov. Grimgore is insane. in his campaign. He is one of the best duelists in the game. Yes, his stats, quote unquote, may not be so good, but when you add his lord effects, his faction effects, his items, you end up with an insanely powerful melee combatant in your army. In fact, Gore is an absolute nightmare to deal with for every other legendary lord that may start next to him, because he's very difficult to take down, and because of the greenskin race mechanics, the greenskins can maintain very large armies for very cheap. They have a good economy, they gain a lot of money from looting and sacking settlements, and Gore does at least have some Kafane caravans that will be going through his territory, so even more money. On top of that, he also starts pretty close to Zarnagrund, and he can take Zarnagrund without resorting to cheese, in the sense that you just build massive armies, you lure the defenders out of Selma because they think they'll win, you lure them, you fight them in an open field battle, and then you go besiege the capital and deal with the defenders in that capital. It is very doable, very possible. And that gives you an insane level of power, because you'll either take it over at tier 4 or tier 5. There's apparently a chance that you can take it at tier 5, though I'm not sure what that is based on when you're looting and occupying it. But either way, regardless, you will get hero capacity, a significant amount of hero capacity. You'll get all the unit types, or virtually all the unit types, very quickly in this campaign, all the hero types. You'll get a ridiculous amount of power, and then you can conquer the world with ease. But it's really fun to play the greenskins. They're very versatile in terms of their unit roster. They're very versatile in their hero roster. Their legendary lords are great, and Gore is currently the best legendary lord of the greenskins. He's certainly a legendary lord the Creative Assembly has put a lot of love and care into ever since the rework with Grom in Warhammer 2. And it's interesting to think that he is one of the few legendary lords that were originally released that actually still has a really, really good campaign right now in Warhammer 3. Then we have Deathmaster Snitch. Deathmaster Snitch is a Skaven legendary lord. Skaven are an A-tier race, but Snitch is absolutely an S-tier legendary lord. He buffs Night Runners and Gut Runners by a significant amount. He has missions that give him food, as well as vision with other factions and diplomatic relations and various other benefits with all the other Skaven legendary lords, with the exception of Tretch Craventel, but who cares about Tretch Craventel anyway? So you're going to get a significant amount of power in Snitch's campaign. On top of that, because of the province he starts in and the general area he starts in Grand Cafe, he has a lot of potential in his campaign. Like, you can look at someone like Frot or Ikeclaw. Yes, they have a lot of power if you're enduring the shitty early game that they both have, but Snitch has a great early game and a really good end game as well. Maybe not as good as Ikeclaw or Frot, who have just more power, but having a strong early game does matter so much in any particular campaign that you are playing. So a great deal of power, and because of all the vision and the diplomatic benefits you're going to get if you're playing Snitch, you may actually end up in a situation where you can confederate all the other legendary lords, with the exception of Tretch, much easier than the other Skaven legendary lords can. So that can give you even more power in a campaign, because the Skaven are spread out around the world. On top of that, because of the schemes, he can get food, he can get income, and he can eliminate faction leaders, which is a ridiculous level of power that you can get in Snitch's campaign. Like, oh, you're dealing with Gore in a campaign, he's a problem. No, just completely erase him from the campaign map. You can do that with a scheme. So a ridiculous amount of power. There are downsides in the sense that non-Eshin units cost significantly more by default. You can reduce the cost by doing various missions for the various factions of the Skaven. So that is a major downside. Another one is that you can't get engineers as easily in Snitch's campaign as you can in other campaigns of the Skaven, because you just don't have the right to put a Skaven lab in another city. You lack that right, which is a bit of a shame. But overall, Snitch is a great legendary lord. He's also insanely good in battles. Like, he is a really powerful duelist. He gets a lot of ambush success chance. He gets a lot of campaign benefits. He just works incredibly well. Then you have Alifanar. Alifanar is basically what you do when you take a Skaven legendary lord and put him for the High Elves, because that's what Alifanar does. He's an ambusher. He has the stock chance, which he can use to attack enemies and get the chance when he's dealing with the field battle. He gets a pretty good chance to ambush an enemy. He has a great deal of campaign potential in the short term. It's not the best campaign to play in the long term, though it still can work pretty well. But in the short term, it's probably one of the best campaigns in the entire game. He gets access to the Shadow Walker units, and if you have the Shadow Warriors DLC, he's all focused on Shadow Walkers and Shadow Warriors. His own army gets a major upkeep benefit for those units, and suffice it to say, they are substantially better than archers with light armor, and Alifanar may maintain those Shadow Warriors and Shadow Walkers for about the same price as archers with light armor, and have a ridiculous amount of ranged combat strength. Never mind the fact that he might just be ambushing enemies left and right, giving him even more combat strength. And on top of that, he has a Lord skill that gives all range units faction-wide 12% missile strength. And then he has the missions to assassinate certain lords that give him influence, gold, diplomatic relations with high elves, and potentially other effects like growth. So he's in a really, really strong position in terms of faction effects, lord effects, missions. He also gets a right that summons an assassin hero that has a 100% chance of assassinating any lord or any target thereafter. So let's say you're dealing with Malekith or Valky, you can just completely remove them from the campaign map. Of course, they're just going to be wounded, they're going to recover, but let's say you have a difficult battle ahead of you, you can just remove that particular threat. Now, he does have a difficult starting position in the sense he's surrounded by Dark Elves, Be'lakor, and Sialostra, so he's got enemies left and right of him, but he has all of the tools needed to succeed in his campaign. Though this is a campaign more designed for veteran players, but it is certainly a really great campaign to play. Then you have Morathi, who is the best Dark Elven Legendary Lord by far. She gets Slaneshi Corruption, which gives her income benefits and control benefits in her empire. She has a great deal of scalability in her empire. She gets a special control building, which allows her to increase Death Hag capacity, so she's going to be running around with quite a lot of Death Hags in her campaign. Not so much in terms of Canaanite assassins, but she does have a great deal of potential. She has an amazingly good starting position with a really great province with 4 regions, so a lot of income to be gained there. She was already really powerful even before Dark Elf rework, but now she's by far, in a way, one of the best legendary lords in the game. Now, she's not the best in terms of a short campaign, but in terms of a long campaign, Morathi is the best of the Dark Elves by far and away. She is insanely good in battles, she has a powerful army, she gets a good lord skill line, she can get sorceress capacity, so you don't even need to build a sorceress structure early on in your campaign and still get those magic users. She's a pretty powerful melee combatant, she has a good mount option, she has good items. She's just got the ridiculous amount of power. Like, I've been playing a Morathi campaign just recently, and it's, like, absolutely ridiculous. Like, just to give you an idea of how ridiculous it is, it's like, what, turn 22 or so, and I've got 2 full stacks marching on Lothern, ready to take it out, and then 2 other stacks marching on the north to take out Alifanar and Sialostra by turn 22. That is absolutely ridiculous. You just need to play the diplomacy game with Axiato, which is pretty easy to achieve, and then you get a ridiculous level of campaign power. Then we have Axiato. Now, the Lizardmen are a mediocre race, to put it mildly, but Axiato is an amazing legendary lord. He has every climate suitable for him, so that gives him a lot of campaign potential, and because of his campaign mechanics that allow him to teleport around the world, he has the ability of just showing up in another territory across the entire map and just conquering it, and no one will be able to beat him back. He gets faction effects for the missions that he's going to get. A lot of money, like his initial mission, which is to just eliminate his initial opponent, a minor coordinate faction, gives him like 5,000 gold. He has a very safe starting position, not so fun as a starting position, but he has only one major opponent there, and that's Kairos. And if you're playing Axiato, you will absolutely decimate Kairos Fateweaver. And then you have every part of the world available for you to expand on with no major downsides. He's focused on the skirmisher infantry units. Basically, if you're playing an Axiato campaign, you might have to fight quite a few more battles than you would normally in a Lizardman campaign, but you will win those battles with minimal casualties, unless we're talking about sieges. That can obviously be an issue, but Axiato does have ways of dealing with that. What's even more insane is that he has those sanctums, so you can show up in a region, put down a sanctum, and get region-wide benefits or province-wide benefits, and you can also put the teleporter stone across the entire campaign map. So let's say you have a mission to deal with Archeon, you can show up, take his capital, and then put Sanctum over there so you can come back there to take over that territory when you feel comfortable. Or just take that territory directly, and Archaon is not going to be able to beat you back. What's even worse if you're dealing with Axiato, let's say if you're playing a multiplayer campaign and you're fighting Axiato, is he has blessed spawnings as a reward for a lot of those missions. Now, blessed spawnings are not regiments of renown. The Lizardmen have plenty of regiments of renown as well. But those blessed spawnings are units you can recruit for free instantly. They obviously cost upkeep, but they're just basically better units than the default Lizardmen ones. So let's imagine the scenario. Axiato shows up in Archaon's capital. Archaon is a really powerful legendary lord. He shows up in his capital, takes it over. Then he recruits another lord. Then he fills that lord with lord's army with regiments of renown and blessed spawnings, or maybe just blessed spawnings or regiments of renown, because there's so many you can fill a full stack. And then, so in a single turn, you've got an entire army and another one you just recruited. And then on top of that, you can recruit a third army on the second turn you're there. That is a biblical level of power. You can do that. You can recruit 2 entire armies, maybe even 3 armies, very, very quickly in short order of pretty good units. That is the level of Axiato's power on the campaign. Then we get Lokir Felheart of the Dark Elves. While Morathi is certainly much better in terms of the late game and in terms of empire building, Lokir is ridiculous in terms of the early game potential that his campaign does have. Because Lokir is all about the Black Arcs and the Black Arc Corsairs. He can get more Black Arcs than anyone else because he doesn't need to use a right to do so. He just needs major ports from provincial capitals in order to increase his Black Arc capacity. So he's able to get, like, say, 3+ Black Arcs very quickly in his campaign. And Black Arcs are great because they have a major upkeep benefit to the units inside there. So you can build entire stacks and actually take territory. They can attack port settlements. And then if you want to move further inland, you just recruit a lord and transfer the army from the Black Arc to the Lord and just move that Lord inland to take over territory, and then move those units back in the Black Arc for the upkeep benefit. He also has a right that gives him a lot of benefits to those Black Arc Corsair units. Black Arc Corsairs are the best early game units for the Dark Elves. Lokir gets a major upkeep benefit with them and major other benefits to his own army to them, but they're generally going to do very, very well in terms of out-resolve, in terms of battle. So he has a really good and powerful early game army, and he starts in one of the best areas of the campaign map in Cathay. He also starts pretty close to Sea Lane. That allows him to go over to Lustria so he can teach Rakarth, who is the true master of Karen Carr. Then we have Alariel. Alariel's early game campaign is not that great, I feel, but in terms of late game potential, Alariel is the best of the High Elves and one of the best legendary lords in the entire game. What makes her so strong is her handmaidens, her faction effects, her lord skills. She gets a lot of handmaiden capacity. She can get more handmaidens faster than anyone else. She also gets faction-wide benefits if she takes control over Wolf One. She does have downsides if from the start of her campaign, if any bit of Wolf One is not under High Elven control, but once it is, you're going to get a ridiculous level of growth, control, income, and leadership to your armies. And High Elves are already pretty strong by default. You add in those benefits that Alariel has, it becomes really powerful. And then you add the Handmaiden benefit. You can increase Handmaiden capacity at tier 3 as opposed to tier 4 for every other legendary lord of the High Elves. And those handmaidens, every single handmaiden can buff your diplomatic relations with all factions by 2, can give you 1 influence, 5% income from trade tariffs, and very importantly, control faction. So you're getting a huge diplomatic benefit, you're getting a trade tariff benefit, so diplomacy with trade tariffs go hand in hand, and you get influence, which allows you to recruit higher quality heroes, higher quality lords throughout your campaign. Alariel is absolutely ridiculous in her campaign, and she can recruit tree spirits only from one structure, from one landmark that only she can use when you're playing her campaign from the Gaian Vale. But the fact she can recruit treekin and treemen gives her an absurd level of power. And then finally, for S tier, the final lord I'm putting it here at S tier with the exception of Warriors of Chaos and Wood Elves is Azag the Slaughterer. Grom has issues in the long term. Skarsnik is, well, pathetic. Warzak has his own issues. But I would certainly say Azag is an S tier legendary lord. He's not as ridiculous as Grimgore is right now, but before the Forge of the Chaos Dwarves, I would have said that playing Azag's campaign was actually better. than Grimgore, because you could let Grimgore do his own thing, conquer a lot of territory, and then show up, beat them, and take over that entire territory for himself. Yeah, that's the benefit in a greenskin campaign. You can just have others do your work for you. But Azag is still a really powerful Legendary Lord. Grimgore has just been mega buffed with the Forge of the Cast Dwarfs difference, the better starting position, etc. But here's the thing about Azag. He starts in a relatively safe starting position, and he has only minor enemies to deal with. On top of that, he can colonize the Empire. And the Imperial factions at the moment are pretty pathetic to deal with. So it's very, very easy to take vast chunks of the Empire and let Grimgore, Skarsnik, Warzag do their own thing and then show up and confederate them very, very easily in your campaign. Or help Skarsnik to deal with Ungrim specifically, or deal with Ungrim yourself. You also get the diplomacy benefit with the vampire count, so you can make an alliance with Vlad if you're so inclined, and just go to dominate the Empire, greenskins and vampires hand in hand. Azag is really powerful also because he has a sacking benefit to a race that already gets a ridiculous amount of income from sacking settlements by default. So he gets, 20% income from sacking settlements. He has more climate types than the other greenskin legendary lords. He is absolutely absurd. Like, Grom is better in terms of faction effects, but he's limited by climate. Azag is not as limited by climate, so he has a lot of potential. He's also a strong fighter in his own right. Not as strong as Grimgore, but still fairly strong all the same. And that is it. Those are the S-tier legendary lords in the game at the moment from my perspective. I mean, there are certainly others that you could count, like you could consider Helmut Gorst or Vlad von Karstein, but if there were legendary lords, if there were campaigns, I would say, like, these are the most powerful legendary lords, these are the guys that have the most campaign potential, these guys have the best campaigns overall. It would be the legendary lords on this list. And I think those kind of things do count. It's not just about strength, it's about how good are the campaigns to play again and again and again. How much potential do you have in those campaigns? What level of frustration are you going to feel? And the legendary lords that I've just listed here, I think just have overall the best campaigns at the moment in the game. Kostin here signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications, and see you next time.